Hi, my friend. Are you wondering whether you've got what it takes to publish a book? I am so happy you're here because today in this video, I am going to be talking to a friend of mine who has done just that. She's gone from being a yoga teacher to a twice published author, and she's going to tell us all about her journey. So please stick around. My name's Kelly Notaris. I'm the founder of KN Literary Arts. We are a full service book studio walking you from wherever you are now to having a book in your hand. Please visit us at knliterary.com for more information. I've also been a book editor for over 21 years, working at some of the largest publishers in the United States, and I bring all of my wisdom to you right here on this channel. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button and click the little bell icon so you'll never miss a video. All right, I am just so excited to bring you my friend Kimberly Ann Johnson. So I'm going to jump right in, but first I want to tell you a little bit about her. Kimberly is the author of the early mothering classic, The Fourth Trimester: Healing Your Body, Balancing Your Emotions, and Restoring Your Vitality, published in 7 languages around the world. A sought-after practitioner and lead authority in postpartum health, Johnson has been working hands-on in integrative women's health and trauma recovery for over a decade. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, Forbes, Vogue, New York Magazine's The Cut, Harper's Bazaar, Today.com, and many more outlets. And her most recent book is Call of the Wild: How We Heal Trauma, Awaken Our Own Power, and Use It for Good. So without further ado, here is Kimberly Ann Johnson.
My first book is called The Fourth Trimester, and that book was published by Shambhala. And then because it was such a great success, they came to me and said, like, let's make some cards. So I thought, okay, that'd be cool. At first I said no, because I thought that's kind of gimmicky and I'm not really a gimmick type of a person. But then I thought, well, but this is actually a way that people, especially new moms who might not actually be able to have the time to read a book, they could just pick something up quick and use it. So I thought, okay, accessibility, that's good. And then that did so well that they were like, let's make a journal. And I thought that's perfect because a lot of people have baby books. And when my daughter was young, I wrote in a book that was like something that I intended to give to her, like things that I was learning about myself that I wanted her to remember. And so it was kind of also a really amazing opportunity to include artwork, which is, I feel like, really important. And the artist, Joanna Johnson, who illustrated the journal, was a student in my courses. And so that work came out of that process. So for me, that felt really special. And then this next book, Call of the Wild, that you held up, that's at HarperCollins. It's Harper Wave, the feminist branch of HarperCollins. And then now I have an audio deal at Sounds True called Reclaiming the Feminine, embodied sexuality as a spiritual path. And that'll come out in winter 2022.
I love that. And you and I met originally because of Sounds True. So I
Yes.
was working at Sounds True with someone who was a friend of yours, Haven Iverson, who's still, I think, an executive editor at Sounds True. And Haven actually came to my house, and I was in an apartment while I was looking for a condo in Boulder. And she said, wait a second, I know someone who used to live here. My friend Kimberly used to live in this house, because it was a house that was broken up into multiple apartments. So from the week I got to Boulder, I heard your name. But at the time you were living out of the country, and so I didn't get to meet you. But then later on, our paths crossed again, and we had, I think we had like coffee at Spruce Confections one day. That was the first time we met. And it was just instantaneous, like simpatico. I totally got you, and it was so great. And then you were starting at that time to work on the book, the first book, The Fourth Trimester. And I wanted to just talk a little bit about that, because I know for the audience that I am speaking to that are watching this video, that first book feels like a major hurdle. Like, not only how do I choose the right topic, but also how do I get a book deal? And then how do I sit down and actually write the whole book? So I thought maybe we could go through those 3 pieces. So how did you land on the topic of the first trimester? And then how did you, find your publishing deal with Shambhala?
So I was a yoga teacher, and my life just radically changed when I became a mom. And in the process of healing myself, I was looking for books to read, and I would Google like holistic postpartum healing or alternative care or something like that. I didn't really know what to look up, but everything I would find was postpartum depression. And I was feeling depressed, but I was like, I think anyone would feel depressed if they were injured and like couldn't work and didn't have enough to eat because they couldn't walk to get things to eat. And so it wasn't hard for me to decide what to write because I knew I needed to write the book that I wish that I had. And I wasn't so daunted about writing itself, although I definitely had the things that everyone has. Am I good enough writer? And but it was sort of like structure was what I wasn't sure about. It was like, I kind of know, but I have no idea how to write an outline or a structure for this. I don't really know where to start. And I had a yoga studio in Rio at the time. And a friend of mine who you also know, Joelle Han, she was taking classes and she knew about publishing. And she was like, you have a book and you should write this book. And she believed in it. And so I was her first client to write a proposal. And she came back to Rio to help me finish the proposal because I'm a single mom and I was still working full time. And I was just like, this isn't happening unless I get some help. So we finished the proposal together. And it's sort of a theme in my life. It's really funny because like I went to Brown as an undergrad and then I went to transfer schools. And somehow I still didn't feel I was good enough. So I didn't even apply to like the best schools to transfer to. It was just like, okay. So I didn't think I could get an agent because I thought, well, I mean, I don't really have a Facebook following and Instagram wasn't around. And, you know, I had a website, but I had a website as a yoga teacher and I'd written like a few articles on Elephant Journal. And I thought like, who's going to represent me? So I thought, okay, I have to go to publishers that don't need agents. So Sounds True, you could submit without an agent, and Shambhala, you could submit without an agent. And since I guess had lived in Boulder for a while, those were familiar places to me. I knew our friend Haven. And so I submitted it to Haven. And it went really far in the process into acquisitions. And it got to the final meeting, and then they decided not to take it. And so at that point, I was like, I don't really know what to do. Then I questioned everything like we all do, like maybe this isn't my work to do. Maybe this wasn't a good idea. Maybe I should just do something else. And maybe at the time, Danielle Ports, like that, she put out this thing that was like a book.
Proposal. Yeah.
But it had all these audio and video links in it. So she sold it for like $179. And so I was like, oh, maybe, I think it was Firestarter Sessions that she included all these hyperlinks. So I thought, well, maybe that's what I'll do with it. And then it just sat in the proverbial drawer. It wasn't printed out, but whatever. It sat in a corner of my laptop for like a year until I had a tarot reading. And the person was like, you have something that's just hanging around that you need to do something with like now. And now, of course, I knew what it was. And so then I contacted my yoga teachers, Richard Freeman and Mary Taylor, who had written a book at Shambhala, and they introduced me to Beth Frankel, my editor. And within a week, I had a deal. So it was like, all of a sudden there it was. And for me, it was really important. A lot of people ask me advice on self-publishing versus a publishing house. For me, for that book, I definitely could have self-published, although of course, if you self-publish, you want to have an audience already, or you want to have a sales funnel of people to sell it to. But I needed the outside world to validate that my idea was important. I needed someone else to say, yes, this is as important as you think it is.
What was that?
I think because of working alone, and I was working internationally, and I think I need a lot of mirroring, and I just needed to feel I was doing it in partnership. And I also was like, I don't have it in me to like be the CEO of my book. Like, I don't have it in me to like hire the graphic designer and manage the graphic designer and figure out all of the things that a book requires. I mean, even the second time around, there were so many vocabulary words that I had either forgotten what they meant or I just had never heard before, because this book came out in hardback in my first back. Like my first book, I didn't get an advanced review copy. I didn't have a hardback. This one was like, okay, we'll send an ARC and the 4P and the this. And it's like, I don't even know what that means.
Just say also that these days you can actually work with a self-publishing coach or a company that does self-publishing services like we do. So you don't actually have to be the CEO of the self-publishing itself, but you do still have to be, and I'm curious your take, because I imagine it's still the case when you get traditionally published, you kind of have to be the CEO of the business of the book, right? Like getting the book out there, talking about it, reaching out to your friends and letting them know the book is out there in the world.
That's more like the CEO of the marketing.
Yeah, exactly.
Than the CEO of the production or distribution. So I felt like I could do the CEO of the marketing, but I didn't know if I could do the other. And I totally agree. I mean, I think there's a lot of in between options right now that weren't around
Totally.
8 years ago when I was signing my contract.
Can we go back and talk about something really quickly about your
Yeah.
book proposal? So, because I remember when you and Joelle were working on the book proposal, you actually introduced me to Joelle, and Joelle ended up working with us at KN Literary for quite a while. It was awesome. She's an amazing writer and editor. And I'm just curious. So, a lot of our clientele, they think, well, I don't really want to put the money into hiring an editor to work with me on my book proposal. And, I'm just going to wait and see if I get that validation around the idea. Talk to me.
I mean, there's so much myth out there about how you go about writing a book that once you've done it, I mean, I tell everyone, my second book, I wouldn't even take the deal without the editor that I wanted included in it.
Wow.
Because unless you like, to me, book writing didn't make me a better writer. It made me better at writing books.
Yes.
Writing a book is not like writing a blog post. It's not like writing a master's thesis. It's not like any of those things, all of which I had done in some variation. I mean, I'd written a lot of 25, 35-page papers in my life. It's nothing like that. So first of all, people also are like, well, I'm just going to write top to bottom the manuscript. No, don't waste your time. You need to know what you're doing before you do it, or else you're just going to spin your wheels a lot. And it's a front end investment. You're investing now to save yourself later. And for me, it was also a question of time. So my first book, I was more, it was more of both books are soul books for me, but my first book was really like, I had to do it. I tried not to do it. I didn't really want to do it after a while, but it was like, I have to do this. Like my soul will not let me rest until I do this. But because I wrote the proposal with Joelle, it was a very good proposal. And then when I turned in my first manuscript, it got rejected. And they expected the caliber that I handed in with the proposal. Well, I never got rejected of anything in my life as far as academics. Like I was crushed. Even the word rejected was like, what? You rejected it? Then I had to go and find an outside editor, which some publishing houses will give you an outside editor, but mine didn't. So I had to go and pay someone more than my advance to help me doctor the book, like what we talked about before we got on here, right? Like a lot of authors end up in that situation where you get the deal because they're buying the idea and the platform, and then depending on the house and your editor, to me, what I did was like, I read acknowledgments of books and everyone's like, and my editor who understands me more than anyone, my ride or die, and so that's what I thought. I was like, oh, I'm going to get a best friend that knows how to ask me all the right questions, that's going to like elicit the best of me, and what I got is like an incredible human who's got a lot of projects on their hands and simply cannot have a fine-tooth comb on my project.
So just to be clear, you're talking about the editor at the publishing company.
At Shambhala, yeah.
Because they're obviously, as you're saying, you get assigned an editor at the publishing company who is the shepherd for your book through the process. And like maybe back in the I don't know, the romantic
80s?
era, yeah, or before. I'm thinking, back in like Fitzgerald and Hemingway, the editor that you worked with was someone who really did have a lot of time on their hands to help you refine and make your book excellent. But as somebody who sat behind desks throughout the early 2000s and through the early teens, I know that that's not what happens anymore because we just had too much on our plate. So you're saying that editor at the house, perfectly wonderful person, probably a really, really good editor, and they didn't probably have time to completely overhaul your book themselves. And they were doing a lot of other things on behalf of your book. And so you had to actually go find a freelance editor to work with who
exactly.
could ride or die.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or, and even that, price ranges were like 5,000 to 13,000. And then who has time, because good editors are busy. And so I didn't have somebody lined up ahead of time. So then it was like my project got pushed back a ton because they didn't, the people that I could hire didn't have time and all that. So it was a huge source of frustration. And then also my business grew a lot between my first book and when I was going to write a second book. So when I decided to write the second book, it was, yes, still soul work for sure. But it was also like, okay, I know what goes into this. And is this good for my business? Because I'm a single mom and I'm the breadwinner, and like her dad lives in another country. So I'm in charge of all the responsibilities. And it was like, this is a huge output of energy. Is it worth it? Kind of thing. And so it was a different, different scales.
Yeah.
And for me, I mean, I run my business and my life pretty much based on my intuition. So for me, for the first step for that book, so I did the deal with Shambhala myself without an agent. I did the deal for the deck without an agent and the journal. The journal offer came at around the same time as I was going to do this next book. But I told my agent, who then I had an agent, I was like, I feel like I did this. Like it's not that I don't want you to be a part of it. It's just that like I built this and I don't really want to share it. Like this like suite feels like a project I did together with Shambhala. And she was fine with that. And for the agent, I went to Haven, our friend, and I said, who are the 4 best agents that you love working with? Who are the people that you enjoy and that you think do a good job representing their clients? And she gave me a list of 4 people, and I looked at them. And then I went on a trip. And when I was on my trip, I met with a friend, and then I said, hey, do you have an agent? And she says, no, but I did talk to this agent. And she had talked to Stephanie Tade, who was one of the 4 people that Haven recommended. And so I called up Stephanie, and I didn't have a proposal and I wasn't really sure how it worked, but she got on the phone with me the next day and I explained to her what Activate Your Inner Jaguar, my course, was about. And she was like, basically on the spot, like, I want to represent you. I think I know someone who can help you with this proposal. Do you want to meet with that person? She connected with me with Colleen Martell, who has a degree in gender studies and like really got it, started taking my course right away. And writing the proposal for that book was like a peak experience. Like it was exactly how I would want it to go. It flowed. I would go on walks and talk. She would take notes. I would get back. I would have the notes. I would fill them out. She would polish them. She was having lots of discoveries at the same time. And we had it done in like 7 or 8 weeks, whereas like my first proposal probably took 6 months.
Tell me a little bit about how you built your platform, since you were one of those few and mighty and proud people it sometimes gets through, who has an amazing book idea and is an amazing writer and can get through the publishing acquisitions process without having a platform. So your first book you got through based on an amazing idea and great writing. I'm curious, what did you do between that book and the second book that ultimately took you to up-leveled you to a house like HarperCollins, where they are going to be more, have much more emphasis on making sure that you're going to be able to sell enough copies of the book to earn out the advance that they give you? Like, what did you do in between those 2 books?
Well, I did tons of podcasts. I started my own podcast. I talked about the things that are important to me. I think it's really important to find out figure out the medium that works for you. So for me, that's improvisational video, choosing the social media platform that I could stick with and that like meant something to me.
And that was having a podcast or a video
Facebook, Instagram. Those are the 2 that I use the most: Facebook and Instagram, and then podcast, and then guest podcasting. I hired outside PR for my first book. So, I talked with a lot of people. I gave a lot of sessions. I wrote a lot.
Yeah. I mean, and that's it. So you were saying earlier, you were the CEO of the marketing of your book. And it sounds like those are the kinds of things that you did. And it all sounds totally on for what I know to be helpful. And I love that you brought up podcasting, because these days it seems like people are able to find authors who they might not otherwise have found by searching a topic in a podcast. And as you were saying earlier, you went looking for information on the 4th trimester after you had your child, and it wasn't there. And so now people are likely going to Apple Podcasts or whatever their podcast app is, and they're searching for the 4th trimester or postpartum, and they're finding you. So I just love that, because I think that applies to most of my clients that are doing work in the world to bring some sort of an idea forward that has not yet been sort of claimed in a public way. And a podcast is an excellent way to do that. So I love that really worked for you. So
yeah, I mean, I love talking to people too. So I wanted to have a podcast so that I could have conversations that I love having, and that I could also be promoting other people's work that I wanted more people to know about. So I do find that that's it has become like, it's quite a bit of work, but I still love doing it. And so I'm found both ways, right? I'm found by being a guest on other people's thing, but I usually just have conversations that I want to have, but I can also be somewhat strategic about it, that they correspond to the book that's coming out or the project that's coming out or the course that I'm teaching.
Totally. And so you also built a course in the meantime. And I think this is really important because you built a course that's basically about the topic of the second book, right? So I want to just bring that up because so often people think I need a book before I can do an online course. And I'm always saying, no, it's the opposite. And I'm curious from your perspective, what were the benefits of creating the course first and working it, with students before writing the book?
I wasn't even thinking about writing a book when I started teaching the course, because basically my daughter kind of made me promise that I wasn't going to write another one. And also I was like, let me let me have my postpartum period from the first one. So I just started I'm a teacher, so I just started teaching, and I had something very specific that I wanted to teach, which was teaching women how to activate their own power and how that changes relationship dynamics. So I just started teaching and kept teaching. But that's when I realized, okay, just like from when I went one-on-one sessions to group courses, it's like, okay, if I really want to change the dominant narrative and I really want everyone to have these tools, this is the next step.
Yeah.
And so it was like that. It was, to me, teaching is what I love doing. It's my gift. And so that wasn't so hard. I'd already been teaching online courses for a while before that. But I think for people who don't, and are like, I do know several people who are writing their first book, and in the question that you're talking about, it's a great way to workshop the ideas, right? It's a great way to not have to make composites of people, to actually have individual situations that you're living through and hearing through the voice. Because I think there's this, because it's such a personal thing for most people to write a book, we tend to think about ourselves and what we have to say, and I need to get this out. That's good, but the other half is, what do people need to hear and how can they hear it? So if you teach, then you're hearing it in all different language. And a lot of people have said that to me, even people that I think are much better writers than me, even though I know it's not a competition, but like you read some people's work and you're like, okay, that is freaking incredible. So people whose work that I think is incredible have told me they learned about writing from my book, specifically because of the way that I talk to the audience, because I know all the questions that people have, because I've taught thousands of people, probably like in your book. It's like, I've had these conversations so many times that as I'm writing sentence after sentence, I know when I need to give reassurance, or I know when I need to give a pause, or I know when someone has a counter argument that's hindering them from hearing the whole message.
Yep, 100%. I totally hear you. And that is something I think is so important. And that is why I love it when people do come to the book writing process knowing inside and out the thing that they're teaching. And it's not always the case. Like for you, you said you were writing your way out of postpartum for the first book, and that is totally fine too. It's sort of like there are multiple different angles we can come at. But I think, as you said, the easier process of writing the book comes when you already know the content. And when you've workshopped it and when you have taught it so many times that all you need to do is sit down and just download it onto the page because you know it so well. So tell us what's coming up for you. What's the future look like for Kimberly? I mean, you're obviously bringing so much to the table and so many really important conversations. And I'm curious, do you have plans in the works for other things? And would you write another book?
Well, my daughter's not here right now, so I can say whatever I want. I don't know. My book just came out 3 weeks ago, or 4 weeks ago now. So I'm newly postpartum.
Right.
And so I don't know. I do have this project coming up, Reclaiming the Feminine with Sounds True. I am teaching a lot, and really what I want to do is extend the message of Call of the Wild into lots of different spaces and have conversations that I think are important that I haven't had yet. I'm really interested in restorative justice. I'm interested in taking things that have traditionally been seen as female, and most most of everything is, it's we're so used to the male body as standard that seeing the female body centered is just really disconcerting for people. So, but my belief is that most people care and most people are trying to do the right thing. So I want to help people have the language, um, to have these harder conversations that are up for us to have. And yeah, I don't know about another book. I mean, I'm only 46, and I mean, I would assume that I'm going to write another book at some time in my life, but I don't know what it's going to be or how soon it will be.
Totally. Well, we will be watching. Thank you so much for just giving all of your gifts and your wisdom and just really telling a story of hope, I think, for a lot of people out there about how it really does happen. It requires dedication, it requires hard work, it requires sometimes financial investment in editors and such. But if you are willing to do all of that, you can actually become a published, well regarded author as you have in the time that I've known you. I'm really, really happy for you.